How much does Jeff McNeil have left in the tank? I'll talk about it on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets. First $5 bet wins. Download the app at FanDuel.com to get started. Right now, if you polled Mets fans and you tried to find the player with the lowest approval rating on this roster, would Jeff McNeil be the guy that is most hated on this team, the guy that Mets fans no longer believe in? Because from just what I can gauge from being on social media and for reading some of your comments when I talk about Jeff McNeil on the podcast, he is pretty high on the list of guys that fans just don't want to watch play baseball anymore. And funny enough, I'd almost say it's the two guys that I think might be on this roster to play second base come opening day. I think it's Jeff McNeil, and then the prospect fatigue is very, very severe here with Brett Baty, where no one really believes that he's ever going to figure it out at the big league level. But Jeff McNeil, at this stage of the game, doesn't have many believers left. And it's because he's had a couple of down seasons in a row, and he's also on a contract that, in retrospect, the Mets should not have given him. But when we really think about what Jeff McNeil has meant to this franchise, I do want to take a step back on the front end of this show today before I get into what to expect this season, to just acknowledge that this guy doesn't quite deserve the flack that he gets, because he is an absolute success story for this organization. How many homegrown multi-time All-Stars do you think the New York Mets have had when it comes to their position players? You go to pitchers, the list gets a little bit longer, but if you're talking about position players across a history that's, over 60 years now, there's only been 7 guys that have been multi-time All-Stars as homegrown Mets. Bud Harrelson, Jeff McNeil, Howard Johnson, your 3 guys at 2 times. Jose Reyes and Pete Alonso 4 times apiece. Darryl Strawberry and David Wright both 7 times. That's it when you're talking about guys who have been multi-time All-Stars who are homegrown. Jeff McNeil is top 20 in this franchise's history in WAR. If he does play out the rest of this contract the next 2 years and he gets 100 hits per season, which is what he's done in the last 3 seasons, even though, obviously 2022, he won a batting title, but even with his struggles the last 2 years, he's gotten over 100 hits. If he does that again the next 2 years, he'll be one of 9 Mets ever to get to 1,000 hits in a Mets uniform. Actually, it might be the 10th, but regardless, he'll be on a pretty small list of guys that have reached that feat. And you're talking about someone that was drafted by the Mets in the 12th round back in 2013, someone that's been in this organization for well over a decade now. So while I understand the frustrations at an all-time high with Jeff McNeil because of the struggles the last 2 years, because he exhibits some of the worst body language you'll ever see from a player on a baseball field, and there's a lot of reasons that you could look at Jeff McNeil's tenure and understand why fans have soured. But you also have to remember the player that he was at the beginning of his Mets tenure and the guy that got the contract. And obviously the contract is part of the reason why fans aren't as supportive of Jeff McNeil now. But I think people are now in revisionist history that say that that was a dumb contract to hand out, or he didn't earn that deal. The Mets should have never given it out. Yes, armed with hindsight, would have been a better decision to have let him play out his arbitration years because he would have been a free agent after this past season. But at the time of the deal, Jeff McNeil was a career 307 hitter. Jeff McNeil had a career 370 on base percentage. He had one bad season in 2021. And at the time, if you include 2020, he had 4 great seasons offensively. If you look at the WAR leaders from 2018 through 2022 at the second base position. Jeff McNeil ranked third behind only Jose Altuve and Marcus Semien. Now, he was 5 wins away from those guys. But the point stands, this is one of the more productive second basemen in baseball. He actually put up more WAR across that span than Ketel Marte and Ozzie Albies, who each played more games than Jeff McNeil across that window. So he got paid, and rightfully so, based on what he had done. But the last 2 years have been really bad. There's no way to sugarcoat it. In 2023, Jeff McNeil hit 270, which for him is not great. 333 on base, 378 slug. I talk about WRC plus a lot in this show. That is weighted runs created plus. It's a stat that measures hitters on a league average of 100. His WRC plus in 2023 was exactly 100. He was a league average hitter. He was worth 2.4 wins above replacement. Good, but a far cry from the, whatever it was, 5.6 WAR that he put up in 2022. Last year, he hit 238. Jeff McNeil, 308 on base, 384 slug, 12 home runs, 97 WRC plus, so slightly below league average, 1.3 WAR. Now, when you look at what he has been the last 2 years, what does give you some hope is he's been able to hit in the second half. But is there going to be a season where he can put it all together? That's what's to be determined. If he can be the second half Jeff McNeil, there might be some hope yet, because you look at the last 2 years. 2023 second half, he hit 291, 337 on base, 438 slug. 7 of his 10 home runs came after the All-Star break. Last year, it was a 40-game sample before he got hurt with the broken wrist, but he hit 289, got on base at a 376 clip, slugged at a 547 clip, hit 7 home runs and 12 doubles in 40 games. His weighted runs created plus was 156. So there has been little pockets over the last 2 years where Jeff McNeil has shown, he still can hit 290. He still can actually impact the baseball, hit some home runs. The question is just, can Jeff McNeil actually do it from jump? Can Jeff McNeil start a season hot? Can he carry it through? Can he be less streaky? Can he be the hitter that he was, that was a multi-time All-Star, that did win a batting title? Is there still one last season where Jeff McNeil, silences all of the haters and hits 300 again and plays great defense at second base, not just average defense at second base, but actually is a plus defender there, and he gets back to being that Jeff McNeil that fans once adored? The guy that everyone was applauding getting the contract at the time because he was coming off a batting title. Is there another year of that left as Jeff McNeil enters his age 33 season, or have we already seen the beginning of the end? And is he going to lose that starting second base job this season and never get it back in a Mets uniform? I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in the next segment. First, though, a quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off, you can get in on the action for that fourth quarter comeback. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing that late game rally or I'm looking for the player that's going to hit that clutch three. I never feel like I've missed my chance. Plus, the app is super easy to use. And when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports when you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Our next goal is to get to 13,000 subscribers by opening day. We got less than 3 weeks to do it, so I appreciate all of you who continue to hit that red button to subscribe. Jeff McNeil last year was slowed in spring training due to a biceps injury. And if you remember, he took a ton of live BP at the end of camp, had a really short ramp up. It was about a week. And then he's your opening day second baseman thrown into the fire. He really struggled at the beginning of the season. And he talked about going into this camp that it would be really beneficial for him to get hot in spring training, to have that as sort of a lead into the year so he can get off to a good start. I know I had somebody ask me today on X, which Mets need to get off to a fast start. And it might be something I do a full show on, but I'll tell you, Jeff McNeil is a prime candidate. He needs to get off to a fast start or he's going to lose his job. He's not going to be a starter all season if he can't pick it up and can't get off to a good start. If he's not hitting above the Mendoza line, if he's hitting 180 through the first month of the season, they're going to have to make a change. He's going to have a short leash. And so far, hasn't been that good in spring training. He's 4 for 21, 4 strikeouts to 2 walks, 2 doubles, 8 games played. He's batting just over 190. Not ideal. Now there's 18 games left and it can change rapidly. Jeff McNeil has a couple, multi-hit games in spring. All of a sudden those stats are going to look a lot better. But for right now, he's not getting off to that hot start that he described. And so when you talk about the leash that he has, how much run will he get? All I think is guaranteed for Jeff McNeil is April. Now, I don't think he's going to get cut, and I think that Jeff McNeil still provides your roster, if he does come off the bench, with a versatile piece and a guy that I think you can do a lot worse off your bench, certainly. If he ends up as the utility infielder, so to speak, the guy that's going to back up second and third and, left field and right field and just play that utility role off the bench, he is very well suited to do just that. And is he going to be the best hitter necessarily in a bench role? Who knows? But for now, he's just starting second baseman. And the only guy on the opening day roster that could challenge that, I think, would be potentially Luisangel Acuna or I guess Brett Baty. Those are the two guys that are primarily in contention. And I think if they made the roster over a Luis de los Santos or a Donovan Walton, the two guys who are vying for that utility infielder job that aren't your young players. I think that with Acuna and Baty, you're going to get more playing time given to those guys because the Mets don't want those guys to rot on the bench. If Luis de los Santos makes the team, I think he's not going to play. That's sort of where I think the Mets are at with this decision. They got to decide, is that a spot on their roster where they want to have a really effective player that can maybe do some things for them and help out in some different areas that can actually swing the bat a little bit? Or do they just want to park Baty and Acuna in Syracuse and have them playing every day, waiting in the wings for if Jeff McNeil struggles? I think the Mets are in position here where they can have their cake and eat it too, where one of those guys can get the first crack on the roster. The other one, along with Ronny Mauricio, is waiting in the wings in AAA. And if either of them is hot, whether it is Acuna and Mauricio, or if it's Baty and Mauricio, if all three of them are in AAA, if any of those guys is hot and Jeff McNeil struggles, they could get the keys to second base early this season. But I would not give up on Jeff McNeil having one last good year because we've seen in stretches the last 2 years that guy is still in there. There is still an above average hitter here. Jeff McNeil is still a very talented baseball player. We forget how good this guy has been at points throughout his career. For whatever reason, it just has not been a fully realized season for Jeff McNeil in some time. But I still think he has one more good year left in him. I just don't know if that comes in a Mets uniform or not. Because I can see a scenario where Jeff McNeil doesn't hit this year, rots away on the bench a little bit. One of these other guys ultimately claims that second baseman of the future title. And we'll talk about those guys in the next segment. Who has the best shot of being the second baseman of the future? I'll go through it. But when you talk about Jeff McNeil having one more good year left in him, I think if it doesn't happen this year with the Mets, this is the last shot for it. He'll never get this much run again as the starting second baseman on opening day. And with 1 year left on his deal next winter, the Mets might try to clear a roster spot and they might take the $15.75 million that he's owed and then might say, no, we're going to eat 12 of it and we're just going to get him off a roster. We're going to set him somewhere else. And if that's the case, I think Jeff McNeil will be a change of scenery candidate that will thrive. You throw Jeff McNeil as a on a small market team. Imagine Jeff McNeil goes and plays in a bandbox. Whether that's in Cincinnati, I could see Jeff McNeil as a Pirate for some reason. That image just struck a chord to me. Or like, oh yeah, I could see that. Where all of a sudden Jeff McNeil is the all-star for a different team, and he's back to hitting over 300, and the pressure's off, and he just gets back to relying on his natural talents and hitting. I can really see it happening somewhere else. This is the last chance for him to do it in a Mets uniform, and I'm rooting for him. I can't say that I 100% buy that it's going to happen. I think I probably have more faith in him than the average Mets fan, but I can't say I'm convinced. I can't say, oh, he's definitely going to turn the narrative. That's another show I'm planning to do at some point here, guys that can turn narratives this year. And McNeil's one of them, but I don't know if he's someone that I'm going to bank on turning that narrative. In fact, I look at Brett Baty, and maybe I'm getting bamboozled by spring training numbers that don't matter, but part of me believes Brett Baty has a better shot at changing that narrative because he hits the ball hard. He's a big athletic guy. And I feel like this might be third time's the charm for him, where he eventually gets some run this season and he might finally hit. I have more faith that Brett Baty, in some ways, can turn the narrative because for him, it's such a low baseline. If Brett Baty this year has a 105 WRC plus, it's a massive win. So again, I want to put the context to that. I'm not necessarily saying put Brett Baty at second base for 50 games, put Jeff McNeil at second base for 50 games. Brett Baty is going to outperform Jeff McNeil. But what I am saying is that based on expectations, they're so low for Baty that just being a league average hitter is going to be a win. For Jeff McNeil, if he's a league average hitter, which is what he has been the last 2 years, it's a massive disappointment. I don't think he has to be all-star Jeff McNeil again, but he's got to run a high batting average. And I think it's that simple. With McNeil, if he's hitting below 250 like he did last year, that's brutal. Now, if he can get that average over 270, if he can continue to do what he did in the second half last year, where he just finds the certain pitches that he can pull and turn on, and he can actually tap into some power, and maybe he could hit north of 10 home runs again. Maybe he can get even up to 15. I think that's a distinct possibility if he gets enough playing time, if he gets hot early enough. I think he can run into a couple more than you might expect. So I still think that it's in there. But when you're looking at this position, to me, Jeff McNeil has to live up to what he was. And league average offensively just doesn't cut it for a guy that was a two-time All-Star that's getting paid a pretty significant amount of money, who is supposed to be one of your better players. He's supposed to be a guy you can count on to be an above average bat. And I don't know if that happens this year or not, but this is the last chance. It really is. And we'll see what he does with it. But if it doesn't work out, who is the best bet to be the second baseman of the future for the New York Mets? I'll talk about that to close out the show. First, though, a quick word from our sponsors. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks in the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. So as we look at this position moving forward, second base, the Mets have so many guys that can be the answer there. I think to start the season, I have been saying it, I believe Brett Baty will be on this roster. So theoretically, he's got the first crack after McNeil. He's the guy that if Jeff McNeil struggles out of the gate, might get a couple starts because he's on the active roster. And so we'll see where that goes. Do I think Brett Baty is going to play second base forever? I don't really think so. I don't know if I could see 3 years down the road Brett Baty as your starting second baseman. I just don't know if I can envision that. In some ways, I can envision him more being your starting third baseman, and Mark Vientos is either your first baseman or your DH. That almost seems like a more viable possibility because I don't know if Baty's going to be anything more than an average defender at second. I think the Mets have multiple guys that can be above average. So then we talk about the guy that I think everyone would probably say is the second baseman of the future right now. And that's Luisangel Acuna. He's the guy that I think most fans are looking at and saying, hey, I want him to start. I mean, if not starting the big league roster, I think some might want him to start at second base too. He still has some things to prove. He still has some development with that bat. But Luisangel Acuna would provide such a high floor. You look at some of the best second basemen in the game. Nico Hoerner is this guy that sort of baffles the mind for me because, you look at a player that doesn't really wow offensively, and I'm always sort of, I don't want to say frustrated, but like surprised at how highly we rank him at Just Baseball where I write. There's so many people on our staff that are big Nico Hoerner truthers talking about how good this guy is. Look at the offensive numbers for him, though. Slugging percentage, let's just look at the career slash line. 278 hitter, 338 on base, 381 slug. So his career OPS is 719. That's nothing special. It's maybe a little bit above league average. Look at the weighted runs created plus over the last 4 years, 106, 108, 104, 103. Always just a little bit better than league average. But you look at the WAR totals for the last 3 years, he's been a 4-win player pretty much every year. 4.3, 4.6, 3.9. Why is that? Because he's an elite defensive second baseman. He's a converted shortstop that plays second. And he gives you that flexibility on the roster where if Dansby Swanson never went down, Nico Hoerner would slide over to short. That's where Luisangel Acuna has such a high floor. And it's very similar to Hoerner, to a Bryson Stott, who definitely struggled last year. So I don't know if you necessarily want to use that as an example, but again, to the defensive first-minded guys that used to be shortstops. Andres Jimenez is another one, a WAR accumulator because he's so good defensively at second base. That's what the Mets could have with Acuna. And that's where you look at Jeff McNeil. You said there's got to be a short leash because if nothing else, if this guy's not hitting, we'll throw Acuna in that spot, and you are going to watch some simply unbelievable defense up the middle with Francisco Lindor and Luisangel Acuna. That is something that raises the floor of your ball club because it's going to help all of your pitchers to have those two guys up the middle. The range that Acuna would have on that side of the diamond. Trust me, Jeff McNeil, Brett Baty, Ronny Mauricio, none of those other options at second base will have that range. Now, if Jet Williams enters the fray, yes, that's another guy that could be elite defensively at second base, and he might provide more offensively. He could be the second baseman of the future. If he's not the center fielder of the future, the Mets still have to decide what the ultimate positional home is for Jet Williams. I still believe that Luisangel Acuna is ultimately going to settle into a utility role, whether he is just a backup utility man off your bench or if he's a super utility guy that is getting in there most days in the starting lineup, but his playing time is all over. It's 15 games at third, 15 games at short, 75 games at second base, 20 games in center field, and he's just all over the place. I think that could be a fantastic role for him. But we still got to see him hit to get to that point where he can be a super util guy instead of just where I think he is right now, where if the Mets wanted to, he's probably the ideal guy to have coming off their bench because he can hit against left-handed pitching. So you could have a platoon at second base, and then he just backs up everywhere, and he's a defensive replacement. He's a speedster. But do you want to put Acuna in that role at this age instead of letting him play every day? I don't think the Mets will. But by the end of this season, who is the odds-on favorite to be the starting second baseman for the New York Mets come the playoffs? I would almost put it as a coin flip between Jeff McNeil or Luisangel Acuna. I think either McNeil's going to hit or they're going to turn to the glove. And they're going to hope that Acuna can hit. And he can figure that side of his game out. But if Jeff McNeil doesn't hit, what are we doing waiting for Acuna at that point? Give Acuna the keys. Let him run with it. And then, you know what, if Jet Williams, can force his way into the conversation by the end of the year, maybe you do at some point give Williams some run and see if he could take the spot if Acuna is just not hitting. But Luisangel Acuna has such a high floor with his glove and his speed that it's got to be tempting to have him take that spot because you are just going to get such elite production in that specific area of fielding up the middle, speed on the base pass, a guy that can get on first base, steal second, bad throw, he might be standing on third, score from second base on any base hit, go first to third, score on any double from first. He's just an exciting player to watch. And that's why fans have already sort of gravitated towards a Luisangel Acuna. But when you look at this position this year, who is the player that gives you the most upside? The guy that can be an all-star at second base, the guy that can put up 5 WAR at second base. I don't know if Acuna gets you there this year. I don't know if Acuna can immediately be a Nico Hoerner type. Because what does Nico Hoerner do? Along with the great defense, it's a slightly above average bat. It's a guy that is stealing anywhere between 20 and 40 bases the last 3 years. So we'll say an average of 30. A guy that is scoring a bunch of runs, but he's hitting for a high average. Is Luisangel Acuna going to hit 280? Or is he going to hit 240? Is he going to get on base at a 330, 340 clip like Hoerner has? Or is he going to get on base at a 310 clip? Because that's the difference between him being a 2.5 win player on glove alone to being better than a 4-win player. And so getting back to who has the highest ceiling at this position this year, there's part of me that still would say Jeff McNeil, because if Jeff McNeil is the guy that he was for 40 games last year, or the guy he was for 70 games or whatever that sample size was in 2023, you're talking about still a well above average bat at that second base position. A guy that could hit in the bottom of the lineup and turn things over for you. A guy that, if someone went down, could slide up to the top of the lineup. Jeff McNeil is on his last legs as a starter for the New York Mets. There are multiple people at this position, because I still haven't even mentioned Ronny Mauricio, who could give you 30 home runs from the second base position if he lives up to his promise. But all those guys have yet to establish themselves as big leaguers. You got 4 of them between Mauricio, Acuna, Jet Williams, and Brett Baty. And then you have one of 7 Mets, franchise history, homegrown Mets, that are multi-time All-Stars. One of 2 Mets ever to win a batting title. A guy that is very close to being either the 9th or the 10th member of the 1,000 hit club in a Mets uniform. What will the end of Jeff McNeil's Mets tenure look like? Will it be Jeff McNeil riding off into the sunset with a couple of great seasons and completely rewriting the narrative of the last 2 years? Will there be just one more good year this year, and then next year he falls off? Will he lose his job by June, be a high-priced bench piece that the Mets are looking to eat a contract to dump? The range of outcomes is pretty wild at this point. But he's going to have the first crack at the job. So we'll see what he does with it. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Follow me on X, Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day. Now, for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything the world of sports. Talking about Locked On Sports today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league. Find Locked On Sports today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube.